Even you've started to sketch a kind of proposal for passing through this period of turmoil and of anger by humility and almost a mystical path wedded to the concept of the fulfilling the last prayer of Jesus, which you mentioned on the night of the Last Supper. He said, he prayed to the Father in front of his disciples and said, Father, I pray that they may all be one, always, that they may be united. So there will be voices which will say, of course, that there's a danger of some type of takeover, of a departure from doctrine, and therefore the church would be undermined and taken away from its apostolic tradition. So it must be fought, denounced, cried out against. And this is what we're having. But you're proposing a re-emphasis on personal repentance and devotion and purification and adherence to the doctrine in somehow a fashion that you are persuaded would help us avoid a terrible tragedy, which would be the shattering, or as you call it, the splintering of the church, which would weaken the church and therefore really cause the triumph of those forces in the last century or two, which have desired to break the church away from its primary gospel message. So you're calling, I think, for a Christocentric renewal of personal devotion, which will, in a sense, ride through whatever is occurring as the world attempts to influence the church, and the church has different responses to that. Is that what you are saying?
Yes, and I think there's one question I think all Catholics should ask themselves is why do God allow us this kind of pope at this particular time in history? You know, there is a saying when it comes to politics that people get the leaders they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, more than 50%, I don't, maybe you can look it up. I think it's like 70 or 80%. It's quite a high number of Catholics do not believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. So why don't they lash out against those Catholics instead of the Pope? Because even though, I mean, the Pope doesn't own the church. I mean, it is the lay people as well. And if they don't live by the doctrine themselves, maybe they get a Pope that doesn't live by the doctrine himself. Maybe it is, you know, a way for God to tell us that we should shape up ourselves. Because I think in the end, if you are Catholic, you believe that Christ is the head of the church, and nothing happens in the church that he does not allow for some reason. So maybe he wants to tell us something with this Pope and the decisions that he's making. And nobody really has ever brought that question up. Why, at this special time in history, does God allow this? And who's being tested? So I think, you know, of course, we should not be have blind obedience. Of course, Catholics are allowed to use their reason and to have their own opinion. But still, there is a hierarchy in the Catholic Church. And if you don't like that, you become Protestant, because this is what Protestantism is all about.